Howdy, howdy do, Who fans, and welcome to the Big Blue Box podcast. My name's Gary.
My name's Adam.
And this is episode 322.
One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.
I've reversed the polarity of the neutron flow, so the TARDIS should be free of the force field now.
You may be a doctor, but I'm the doctor. The definite article, you might say.
The trouble with time travel is, one never seems to find the time.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding, etc., etc.
I am the doctor!
For now, for this moment, I am the doctor again.
The ground beneath our feet is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. And the entire planet is hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and I can feel it. We're falling through space, you and me.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
I could be a curator. I'd be great at curating. I'd be the great curator.
I could retire and do that. I'm the doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years, and not all of them were good. I've made many mistakes, and it's about time that I did something about that.
Bit of adrenaline, dash of outrage, and a hint of panic knitted my brain back together. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Sorting out fair play throughout the universe.
Hey, Doctor Who fan. Welcome back to the Big Blue Box podcast. Hope you're keeping well and safe. You've had a cracking week and that you've managed to do something Doctor Who related. Not belated, although that might be appropriate this week because we were not here last week.
No.
So a belated. Hope you had a cracking last week and this week thus far.
I feel like we've slipped through like a wormhole or something. It seems like ages ago. I was saying just before we started recording. It seems like ages ago we recorded the last podcast. I can't believe it's only a week. Like normally time goes fast, but it feels like a really long gap. I don't know why. Maybe I've been abducted. Or you've been away. Yeah. Gary's been in Cornwall and I've been on Mars.
We've slipped through the space and time gone to minimum. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It does feel weird because there have been times where you and I have had longer breaks. We've had 2 weeks off sometimes.
Yeah.
3 weeks off on one occasion. We came back, it felt like we did it yesterday. But this week, for some reason, it feels like we haven't done it for ages. We're a bit out of practice.
We both
weird.
said it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so much so, I hope you don't mind me telling this, but so much so when I first joined Skype, I couldn't hear Gary. And I said, I can't hear you. We both were sort of looking at each other over Skype, and then he realised he hadn't got his microphone in front of him. And we were like, blimey, we are out of practice.
That was weird, that one, I must admit. Yeah.
Well, A, that you did notice, and B, that I didn't think, oh, where's Gary's microphone? I just was, oh, well. Can't blame the technical gremlins for that one.
Fun times, eh?
Yeah.
Fun times. If you've wanted to start a podcast before, all of these weird and kooky fun things await. So get on it. I haven't heard many new Doctor Who podcasts in a little while, you know.
No.
Normally there's about 3 or 4 that spring up every year. And normally one of them out of that collection carry on for longer than a year. But this year I've not seen too many pop up. There was one that looked kind of cool that I started listening to a few weeks back, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's normally, because it's weird because the podcasting industry as a whole is growing very quickly and stuff.
Yeah, everybody's doing a podcast now, aren't they?
The name of said show, there was a couple that I thought, yeah, they were pretty sweet because I do listen to quite a few. Well, I say quite a few other Doctor Who podcasts these days. The first one was called, a bit of a shout out to these guys. The first one was called A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife.
Great name.
Yeah, which is cool. Done by a guy called Joe Ford.
What is that about? Like, what is the podcast about?
It's commentaries on various Doctor Who episodes.
Oh, right. It doesn't sound like a Doctor Who podcast. Eh?
Yeah, just gets other people on. So basically, you it's one of those you're supposed to be watching along an episode while he's talking about it, and he gets people on stuff. It's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. And the other one I can't actually find, so apologies. Other one, that's your name at the minute. Other one, I can't remember. I think it's called. No, I should have prepared before we started recording. So, yes, ignore me.
While Gary's looking for that, I'll tell you that genuinely, while you were on your holes last week, I listened to Proctor who I've been listening to for many years, but they did a couple of anniversary episodes, and because it's 7 years since they started.
Oh wow!
And Mark, who I think started the podcast, he left. He's left a couple of times, but he left properly a few months back, or maybe a year back. I'm not sure. And but he's come back for these anniversary podcasts, and it was just such a chilled 2 episodes. It was just him, and he just had a really sort of laid back chat with the guys that he does the podcast with, like the original members and stuff. And that was great. I really enjoyed that. And I also like the Lost on Gallifrey podcast. Those 2 guys, I've said it before. They remind me of like they're me and you, sort of a younger version. it's like us as 20 something. So that's a cool podcast.
Oh,
but
nice.
They're not one for if you like the Jodie era. They're probably not for you, because they're not a fan of the Jodie era. But those guys are great. I really like their podcast.
Yeah, they've been going for a while. Yeah. Yes. And also, the other one, Proctor Who.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about the anniversary one. Yeah, they're really cool.
So, is he back for good, or is this just
No, Mark just popped back for a little bit because Bob Fleming, who does the podcast now, he used to be quite wild. I think he's on the podcast. He stopped drinking. He's so mellow compared to how he used to be. Like the swear button used to have to be pressed quite a lot when Bob was on. But yeah, he's really chilled out now. It's quite strange.
I remember the early days of Proctor Who. I think you and I spoke about it on one of our episodes. I think you said, I found this cool Doctor Who podcast.
Yeah.
And started listening to it. And then I thought, yeah, it's a good show, that.
Yes, it is. It is good.
Yes, indeedy. How have you been, mate? Have you done anything Doctor Who related over the past week?
A little bit, yeah. I listened to a vinyl. Spinning the decks, I was.
Oh, nice.
I listened to the new Myth Makers vinyl.
Have you got a vinyl player? Have you got a deck?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I've got a player, yeah. It's just, it's a bit of a faff because I have to plug it into this sort of external speaker thing. I haven't got it set up properly. But yeah, I bought a couple of vinyls recently and I thought, do you know what? I should listen to them rather than just look at them and go, oh, that's a nice cover. So I listened to the Myth Makers. It was... it's because I wanted to do a review of it. I thought, well, I better listen to it so I actually know what I'm talking about. And I've never heard that story before. It's like, it's a William Hartnell story, and I love Hartnell, and I thought it's one that I'm aware of. It's quite a famous one, and I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. I thought, was it like a historical? Is it going to be really boring or what? I really loved it. It was kind of one of those, some of the Hartnell ones, they've got that sort of. I'm trying to think like the Romans, where it's got that sort of slightly comedic edge to it. So it's less serious. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that. It's really good fun. And Hartnell's in it pretty much all the way through. Like sometimes he goes on holiday for a week. In this one, he's in it all the way through and he's really good at it. So I found myself getting really into that one. I quite enjoyed it. So it's totally missing as well. So there's not even any telesnaps for it. It's a completely, like, the only way you can currently experience that story is through the vinyl. It's through the audio. I mean, I think you can download it, and there was a CD of it back in the day and stuff. But yeah, so that's the only way you can, enjoy the Myth Makers is on audio. It's really good. So I listened to that and found that enjoyable. It's just so good to hear some Hartnell I hadn't ever experienced before, because I just love him. And there is a couple of bits where he's really going for it, and I was thinking, I wish we could see this. It'd be amazing. The only other thing I've done is I've just finished reading Matt Lucas's autobiography, very randomly. This is me going through stuff that I've bought over the years and not actually read or listened to. So I was like, I bought Matt Lucas's biography ages ago, never read it. And I was aware that there was a Doctor Who bit in it. So I thought, right, let's give that a go. Quite enjoyable biography. And there is a cool bit in Doctor Who. On Doctor Who, he talks about working on Peter and Pearl. And he also says that his partner at the time, who sadly died, was a massive Doctor Who fan, huge Doctor Who fan. So when they got together and they got married, Matt Lucas bought him Doctor Who stuff. And one of the things he bought him was the original Eccleston TARDIS prop. And he said, so for ages we had, the actual prop that was used in the Eccleston series. He said for ages we had it, in the basement of our flat when we put like lights in it and stuff. And, people used to love it. They'd come over and they'd have to go and have a picture in the TARDIS and stuff. And I thought, amazing. But then, sort of long story short, him and his partner split up, and before his partner died, and his partner took the TARDIS with him to Edinburgh. And Matt Lucas says, I've no idea where it is now. It's just could be anywhere. So I was like, oh no. So where is Eccleston's TARDIS? It's went to Edinburgh and it hasn't been seen since, apparently. But yeah, so that was quite cool. So got some good interesting little nuggets of info from Matt. Because I remember when he was they said he was going to carry on as an adult. I think a lot of people were like, how's that going to work? Because he seemed like a sort of one-off character, didn't he? But
that's right.
Yeah. He actually went on to be a really fun part of Series 10, wasn't he? It was like a really nice character to bring back. What was it? I think Stephen Moffat did that with someone else. It was. Oh no, I'm thinking of Catherine Tate. I was going to say it happened a couple of times that people were like, someone was announced and you'd be thinking that ain't gonna work, and yet they turn out to be absolutely brilliant. And I like old Nardi.
Old Nardi, yeah.
Well, I like him in Series 10. I don't really like the episode Husbands with a Song. But the weird thing is, Matt Lucas said starts the chapter in Doctor Who by saying when he was offered it, he'd always swore he would never do Doctor Who. And I thought, oh no, why? Why would he? Why would he say that? He says, I always said I would never be in Doctor Who. But then he goes on to explain why, and it's all because of what happened with his husband, and it's all to do with emotional stuff, not that he didn't want to be in it. And he talks about sort of sitting at the read through and just sitting there thinking, I said I'd never do this, and I'm feeling all the emotions I knew I was going to feel. What am I doing here? And it's like it's really strange to think that someone's going through all that, and it's a good little insight into his time on Doctor Who.
That sounds cool.
Think he must have, it's a good little chapter. I think he must have still been in the show when he was writing it, because I think he's, even by the end of the book, he's still talking about being in the show. So,
right.
Yeah. But so that's cool. So yeah, apart from that's been my sort of Who stuff in the last sort of week. Haven't really done much else.
That TARDIS is going to appear in someone's garden somewhere in about 20 years' time. There will be an article online about trying to identify the origin of that prop, because it's been rained on and everything in someone's garden.
Yeah.
And they'll try and figure out where it came from. Yeah, guaranteed.
I think he said he bought a Dalek as well, a full-size Dalek, after he bought the TARDIS. Yeah. But he said they couldn't get it in the London flat and they took it away again. But he doesn't elaborate on it, so I don't know what happened to that Dalek. So somewhere out there's a TARDIS and a Dalek owned by Matt Lucas, but where they are, I don't know. That would never happen with me. I couldn't. The OCD in me could never let that happen.
You'd have to get one of those little label makers. And in an inconspicuous place where you wouldn't see it right away. You'd have to look for it on the inside somewhere. Property of Adam Charlton, do not touch.
Yes, it. Hands off.
Hands off, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't expect, because you've been down in Cornwall, haven't you? So I doubt you've had any time to do anything Doctor Who, have you?
No, mate. No, I've been down in sunny Cornwall. Yeah. Enjoying the sea air, some fresh air, and going off the grid for a while. Yeah.
Are you going to do a comedy Cornish accent to get us into trouble?
I will not. No.
Oh, okay.
But no, it was really nice to just be away. Sometimes when I've gone on holiday, because me and my family, we have a couple of shorter breaks in the UK, but our main trip is normally over Christmas and New Year. We go away, and we typically end up doing a city break most of the time. So I normally go hunting for comic book shops and stuff like that. I normally bump into some Doctor Who stuff as I'm out and about, or in the hotel. I watch like what used to be the Christmas special and stuff like that. But this was a sunny beachy vacation, if you know what I mean. So there wasn't, there wasn't any. And I did have a look. I did have a sneaky look while we were there. And then one day we did drive off to another town that was close to where we were. And I did find a really cool little comic book shop, actually. I'll give them a shout out in case anyone's down that way. It's called Into the Realm. Just make sure I'm saying that properly. Into the Realm. Cornwall. Independent comics and science fiction shop. It was a cool little shop, actually. I ended up buying about a dozen single issue comics and a couple of Funkos and stuff like that. It's really weird because I've been after a couple of Funkos. I know I don't really do them these days.
I know, I was just about to say.
Yeah, but I'm kind of into the... I started off getting one of the Batman Funkos, but it was from the old animated series. So I got one of those a while ago, and I thought, I want to get a few more of them. Couldn't find them anywhere online. Like Amazon had sold out, like the usual suspects. I was in this comic book shop; they had loads of them, like loads that you would normally see as sold out online. So I picked a couple of those up, and I ended up chatting to the lady that owns the shop. She was really nice, but it was a really cool little comic book shop. As inevitably for these guys to stay in business these days, comic book shops and not just comics these days. Anyone that's been into them in the last, 10, 15 years, I suppose, they have to branch out now into toys and collectibles and all sorts. So they've got a fair few of those as well. Action figures and stuff. It was a really nice little shop. So that was the closest that I got to anything kind of collectible Doctor Who. I did see a few Doctor Who comics there. And it was the older ones that they used to do in like the trade paperback, like the classic Doctor ones and, like the McCoy, what I'm trying, like the old McCoy ones. Hold on. Yeah, you get like the old McCoy ones, the Hartnell ones. They were out about 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Is it the IDW ones?
The IDW ones, that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
They had about 10, maybe 15 of those. Most of them
for ages.
Yeah. And that dude was the closest I got to anything Who related.
Yeah. Probably nice to have a break.
But that was it, mate. Yeah, that was the point of it, was to, because I'd not had any time off since December last year. Because I changed jobs and stuff and busy and stuff. So, it was really nice to bugger off for a little while and not do anything like that. But, yeah.
It's always nice to get away.
Indeedy. Now we're back into it, mate. We've got a busy end of the year coming up, I would say, because we have probably another 6 to 8 weeks worth of regular stuff. And then I'm assuming, hopefully, that Series 13 is going to drop in the next month or two.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumours at end of October, isn't there? A lot of rumours around 31st of October. I don't know where people are getting that from. Probably just guessing. But be nice to think we could be reviewing some new Who fairly soon.
Defo, yeah. So we're back into it, mate. Before you know it, we'll be pulling crackers around the Christmas dinner table. And
I am surprised. This year is flying by, apart from the last week. But this year is. I can't believe we're in September. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts, mate. It's always for me. It's always September. Whenever we click into September, that for me, for some reason, feels like we're at the end of the year almost. I think it's like it's a weird psychological thing with the way that September is spelt and said, because it's an ember, the last few months, for me, it feels like, right, Halloween's around the corner. Once Halloween's out the way, then it's Christmas, and then 2022 is upon us. Yeah.
I do know what you mean. Yeah.
Weird that. Anyway, that's what we've been up to. Before we crack on, we have got one bit of news, not really news, it's a bit of merch, but it's a cool bit of merch. But before we crack on with the rest of the show, remember to follow our podcast, listen for free on whatever podcast you prefer to listen to your podcast on. A new show lands every single Friday. So if you follow us on anything like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon Podcasts, Google, all of that stuff, we're on all of that stuff, then that'd be cool because you won't miss a show. You'll be able to listen to all of them every week, which is nice. We're on the socials too, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. You can search for us on those apps, or if you head over to our website, which is bigblueboxpodcast.co.uk, there are links to everything on there. Give us a like and a follow on the socials as we chat Doctor Who and bits and bobs throughout the week. And we have a free Discord server as well. It takes just 30 seconds to sign up. Come and hang out and chat Doctor Who with plenty of other Doctor Who fans. And also, remember to check out my co-host channel over on YouTube. It is, of course, The Geek's Handbag.
Yeah, go check it out. I've been beavering away for non-stop pretty much for the last 2 weeks, trying to make a couple of new videos. So, yeah, go and check them out. Got a little review of the new Terrence Dicks books, which are cool.
I saw that, mate.
And,
nice.
And I've got by the time this podcast goes, I should have a new video out taking a look at that Mythmakers vinyl I was talking about. So, yeah, go and check out the new vids.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, so go and, I say every week, and I mean it sincerely every week, go and get comfy, get a drink, and settle in and watch loads of videos on Adam's channel. Very, very cool. Geeky stuff. And Adam's on the socials too, under the same name, The Geek's Handbag. Go and stalk him. Go and chat sci-fi and Doctor Who.
That's it.
Right, let's land it, dude, and talk about this bit of news.
Alrighty.
So apparently, there was quite a bit going on in Blackpool back in the 70s and 80s for Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So I'm led to believe. I wasn't alive then. I love saying that. Well, I was alive when they were doing some exhibitions into the early 80s, but I wouldn't have remembered it.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I love saying that. Because I normally feel
making
old.
me feel really old, because I did go to Blackpool and I do vaguely remember it.
But yeah, Blackpool was home to some exhibitions from Doctor Who back in the 70s, before I was born, and the 80s, and then he did another rerun in the early 2000s. And to have a trip down memory lane and to catalogue a lot of this stuff, there's a new ebook that has just landed. It's called Blackpool Revisited, and it looks at the history of these famous exhibitions and all that stuff. It's a follow-up to another ebook that they did last year called Blackpool Remembered. So this is the follow-up to that. And as I said, it goes through and charts all the history of these exhibitions, and the first one, which ran from 1974 through to 85, and then David Boyle's Doctor Who Museum, which was open from 2004 to 09. And it's also got it's that kind of coffee table book where it's just got tons of photos, loads of supporting text that take you through all the history and so on, and a little bit of blurb from the forward from Lorne Martin. Says the reaction to the first book inspired us to do another one, this time even bigger, 600 pages. Wow. 600 pages with content from over 90 contributors, as well as more memories and nostalgia from the original exhibition. We take a detailed journey through Doctor Who, through the Doctor Who Museum, alongside a look at the life of its curator, David Boyle. We also look at the Blackpool Illuminations, Edwin Hall Dalek rides, Sevens models, DePaul toys, the Whomobile, interviews with artists Andrew Skilleter, Rod Vass and Graham Potts, plus much more. And I took a look at the website earlier. You can see a really nice cover and stuff. And just a reminder, this is a free ebook. So I'll put a link to this in the show notes. It's a PDF, and just have at it. It sounds like a really cool book. I've already downloaded it. I'm going to take a read over the weekend. So yeah, seems like a good book, this one, dude.
Yeah, I was going to say these are lovely. I mean, I know I'm always banging on that I'm a physical product person and the stuff, but the amount of work that's gone into this, I'm definitely downloading this and having a look. It's wow, what a lovely thing to do, and the fact it's free as well. Yeah, I'm definitely downloading this, mate. Gonna have a look at that. As I said, I do. You know, I've got very vague memories. I don't know how old I would have been and what year, but I do remember my dad taking me. Well, my mum and dad taking me to the Blackpool exhibition, because I can remember walking down and seeing the TARDIS console, but I didn't realise it at the time. But it wasn't like the proper. It was like one that had been made especially for the exhibition. I think it was like an unofficial, but to me it just looked amazing. So, but that's all I can remember about it. But God knows what year that was or how old I was. I probably don't want to know.
Yeah, it's probably best
probably would have been the 80s though. I think
leave it alone. Yeah,
yeah. No, I'm sure it was the 80s.
Okay, and then just a nice little nugget of an additional bit of stuff to look at when you go onto the website for the ebook. If you scroll down past where the download button is, keep going. They reference the cover artist, which is a guy called Alex Storer, and they put a link to his website where where he's got some other Really cool artwork that he's done, not just for Doctor Who, but like fantasy and sci-fi. There is a Doctor Who section, and he's put some artwork on there that he did for Doctor Who magazine over the years. And some of that, there's not a lot on there. There's about a dozen or so pieces, but it's gorgeous. Really nice work.
I'm looking at him now, yeah.
Yeah, so go and check it out.
That's really cool. Yeah. And free.
And it's free, of course.
You can't go wrong, can you?
Yeah, so Blackpool Revisited. Go and give that a download. An interesting look at some of the stuff that happened before I was born. When Adam was
All
alive.
right. Keep rubbing it in.
Right, that's it for news, mate. What are we going to do for review this week?
Yeah, so this week it's the 5th Doctor in his very first adventure called Castrovalva.
That's the trouble with regeneration. You never quite know what you're going to get.
I'm the Doctor. Or will be if this regeneration works out.
We need to take him somewhere uncomplicated. Somewhere away from technology.
Classic plainness, as exemplified by regions like dwellings of simplicity.
Castrovalva.
Someone's manipulating Castrovalva. The regeneration is failing.
We're heading straight into the biggest explosion in history.
That laugh, I know. Oh, dear. There's one bit where he must laugh for about, feels like 5 minutes. And you can just imagine the director going, keep going, Anthony. Keep going. Bit more laughter, please. It's just,
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'll read you. Yeah, Fiona Cumming was like, I've watched a few cartoons recently, and the baddie always has this evil cackle laugh.
Yeah.
So let's do that. Anyway, Castrovalva. Castrovalva was released, or first broadcast, back on the 4th of January, and it finished up on the 12th of January. 4 episodes, 25 minutes each. It was written by Christopher Bidmead, directed by Fiona Cumming, overseen by Eric Saywood and John Nathan Turner. Peter Davison is first outing properly as the Doctor, accompanied by Matthew Waterhouse, Sarah Sutton and Janet Fielding. And the synopsis is the Doctor's latest regen has proven most unstable, and his two companions, Tegan and Nyssa, help him recuperate on the tranquil planet of Castrovalva. Adric has been captured by the Master, who is taking advantage of the Doctor's weakened state to ensnare him in an elaborate trap whose recursive nature threatens to destroy his mind. As the Doctor begins to recover, he realises that the Master's trap for Adric is even more intricate than he could have imagined, and that he will stop at nothing to gain his revenge over the Doctor. Which sounds rather good. Oh, man. So, Castrovalva, dude. Hit me up.
Castrovalva. Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for this one because I absolutely blimmin' loved it as a kid. It fascinated me, all the stuff with the TARDIS. It's funny because I have to try and sort of take off my rose-tinted glasses when we do reviews because I find this really enjoyable. But if you watch it, as a piece, as a script, and try and analyse it, is as good Doctor Who. It is a strange story, and it's some of it doesn't really work at all. But I've always liked it. I just find it enjoyable, and I just love it when they explore the TARDIS, and I think so does Christopher Bidmead. Because if you think about Logopolis, the story before it explored the TARDIS a lot, and again in this story, the first 2 episodes pretty much are entirely inside the TARDIS, which is quite a bold move, really. And I don't think it's something they would do today necessarily, especially not as an introduction to a new Doctor. I think it's a really strange introduction to the new Doctor, but I think for when it was made and the time, it just totally works. So I just think, I just find it a really fun watch. It does plod a bit, I must admit. Watching it again yesterday, I watched it 2 episodes at a time. I think episode 3 it's that dreaded episode 3. There is a lot of walking around. The first sort of 10 minutes of the episode seem a bit disjointed, actually, I notice. So yeah, I could totally understand if somebody was watching this and they weren't really into it, they would find it a bit of a slog in places. But because I loved it as a kid, and every time I watch it, it just takes me back to being in front of the TV watching it. I just love it. All the stuff, the Zero cabinet, I was obsessed with as a child. I turned one of my parents like a wardrobe or something. I don't know what it was. I remember getting this white sort of cabinet and putting it on the floor, and I would lay in it and pretend it was the Zero cabinet. drove my parents nuts. So something about this story, very much like Logopolis, just captured my imagination as a kid, and I love it. So every time I watch it, it just takes you back to being a child, really. But I think it's got some great stuff in it as well. I don't think it's just nostalgia. The reason I like it, I think there is some really interesting ideas. I still love it when they're trying to escape from Castrovalva and it's closing in on itself. I think that's brilliant, and I love the effects as well for the time. I think it's great the way they sort of fragment the screen to make it look all disjointed. And I like the fact that Peter's doctor's struggling, the regeneration's not quite working. I love all that stuff at the start. It does go on a little bit too long, I think. I think by the time he gets to Castrovalva, you kind of want him to be the doctor. But I love all the stuff at the start and him going into the Zero room and all that stuff. And unraveling the doctor's scarf, which I remember at the time being like, what? No, you can't do that. That's sacred. All that stuff, and seeing the scenes where he gets his costume and all the stuff that you love from a regeneration story, I think is kind of thrown in this one. He does impressions of the other doctors, which are a bit cringy, to be honest, but I still like it. And he references loads of things like Canine, and I think he calls Nissa Vicky at one point, and all that stuff. Mentions Romana. There's just lovely little things thrown in for the fans, and I don't know. It's
impression.
Yeah, the Hartland impression, and I think he does a terrible Troughton impression at one point, doesn't he? So it's like, come on, Jamie, it's a bit cringe, but there's a lot to enjoy in this story. I think I've always had a soft spot for it, so it's going to get a thumbs up from me. I do think it's odd, and I do think I could totally understand people who don't enjoy it or find it a slog, but there's something about it that I've always just really liked. I never really get tired of watching it. The Logopolis and this one back to back, I just love them, really. And they flow quite nicely from one to the other, I think, as well. Yeah. So what do you reckon? Because you like Logopolis, don't you? I remember when we reviewed it.
Yes.
You like Logopolis, don't you? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I actually quite like Castrovalva.
Oh, do you? Oh, right. Okay, good.
Yeah. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that. I always put it down to the nostalgia, but yeah, I always think that because it is odd.
Strange,
it's
isn't
a strange intro episode, isn't it, for the new Doctor?
It is a bit. Yeah, it's a weird mix of... You can see what they were trying to do, absolutely, with the whole... he's not quite sure what's happening to him. He knows he's regenerated, but he's not got his head together yet, and his cells are, rebuilding and stuff. I think they play a lot on that in the modern Doctor Who, Defo, where they go a bit more sciencey with it. Even though Nissa does throw in a couple of little lines about, his cells are doing whatever, and that's all cool. And the reason why he needs to get to Castrovalva is because there's, that's a particular place, even though the Master's orchestrated it, he thinks it's a place where he can, calmly finish his regeneration and stuff. And that's why he needs the Zero Room and all that stuff. So it's a little bit, they play on that, which is kind of cool. But I do agree with you. I think it does go on for a little bit it's pretty much up until halfway through episode 3, really, that he's still got that, who's the Doctor? I'm looking for him as well, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he's sort of collapsing on the floor, and you kind of want him to be the Doctor by that point. It did remind me a little bit of Tennant in the Christmas Invasion, where he literally only turns into Doctor in the last sort of 5 minutes, But so it's a little bit like that in a way. Yeah,
it's a bit, yeah.
Because it's not till the end he puts on the celery, is it? The very last scene, he plonks on the celery on the jacket, and he's getting in the TARDIS, and he's fully back to health, and you think, oh right, he's now the Doctor, but it's literally the very end, really. Up until then he has moments, but he's really sort of struggling with the regeneration, isn't he?
Yeah, and that part of it, if you look at that in isolation, that's very cool, especially the first couple of episodes where he's wandering around the TARDIS and he's unraveling the scarf. You know, even though Tom Baker fans are passing out with disgust that he's, you know, picking apart the scarf and
he rips the waistcoat as well. I noticed just
so Tom Baker fans have probably thrown their remote across the room at this point and, you know, declared that they were never watching Doctor Who again. But that was all cool, that bit where he was getting rid of his, you know, that transition to shedding, if you like. It's almost like a metaphor. He's like shedding the skin of literally the clothes of the previous Doctor, and now he's finding his own outfit and all that stuff. It just goes on for too long, though. So I think that's why it feels like a bit of a slog, because when you get into, especially when you get to the end of episode 2 and you think, right, the cliffhanger's potentially going to be, he's now sort of, you know, the light bulb moment where he remembers exactly who he is and what he needs to do and stuff, but that doesn't happen. And then when you get into episode 3, you think, right, he's almost getting there, but he's still a bit weak and, you know, stuff's happening. And then, like you said, it's not until the final sort of moments and that final part, really, the final act, where he actually, you know, becomes his Doctor, you know, his version of Doctor and stuff. So I think that's, for me anyway, why it feels like a slog. It's just a bit of a, come on, dude, you know, you need to wake up, and it just needs somebody to give him a brandy and a shot across the face, wake him up a bit. You just want to shake him. You just want to, like, come on, it's time to be Doctor Who for at least 2 of these episodes out of the 4. So it does feel like a bit of a slog, but
it's episode 3, I think, when he's in the cabinet. There's too much of them carrying him around and trying to get the cabinet to Castrovalva. It's just too much filler going on there. You just need to cut from, he gets in the cabinet, they get to Castrovalva, and then because the story sort of moves on then. Once they get to Castrovalva, we do get some interesting stuff going on. Like I said, when they're trying to escape, and the stuff with Paul Treve, and you get to meet some new characters and stuff is finally happening. But episode 3, like a lot of Doctor Who's, just kind of kills the momentum a bit, because it is literally just them walking through the forest. They drop the wheelchair in the water. You know what I mean? It's just too much padding in episode 3. It's a shame, really. But I can, you know, it doesn't bother me too much. But it would have been nice to have cut to the chase a bit more, because I think when they get to Logopolis, it gets quite interesting again. You know, some lovely scenes, and there's a great bit when the Doctor's trying to count, and that little kid comes up to him. He's like, 1, 2, and she goes 3. He goes, yes, that's what I was thinking. And it's a lovely scene, and it really reminds me of Troughton. It reminds me of Troughton in, like, The Mind Robber or something. It's just the Doctor being really charming. And then he remembers Adric, doesn't he? He's like, oh, you should get a star for mathematical excellence. And he's like, Adric, you know, and all that. And I think there's some really good, nice bits of writing in the 4th episode. I mean, that might even be the 3rd, but I don't think it is. But anyway, once they get to Castrovalva, things sort of pick up again, I think. It's such a ridiculous, elaborate plan. This is what I mean. If I'm just watching this for my own personal enjoyment, I don't really question it. I just enjoy the story. But when I'm watching it for review, I'm thinking yesterday, why is the Master going to all of this trouble? He could so easily just, you know, kill the Doctor if he wanted to. I know it's all about the cat and mouse sort of thing, but it's a ridiculously elaborate plan just to kill the Doctor, isn't it? And when he's trying to break into the cabin at the end, it's almost laughable. It's like, why have you done all this just to lure him the cabinet there? It doesn't really make any sense. But you kind of just go with it, I suppose, don't you? In a way. A bit like the tapestry. I'm like, what's the tapestry about? That's just weird. Like that tapestry screen. I mean, I like it because it is strange. But what's it about? Like the tapestry with a monitor on it. I don't know. And Adric's projecting from beyond it. Because that's the other thing I was thinking yesterday as well. Adric's on the TARDIS at the beginning, but he's not really there. So he's a projection. And again, that doesn't really add up if you think about it too much. But I don't know. I just try not to think too much about it. And I find it quite enjoyable if I don't delve into it too much.
Yeah.
Because I think the performances are fun, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it can get a little bit sort of mind melty if you try and stick to the Master's plan too much. Yeah. It is very elaborate. Because at first you think, oh, he's just trying to blow the TARDIS up by sending it into, what was it, the inrush? You know what I mean?
When it's all heating up and
So you think, okay, he's just trying to literally just destroy the TARDIS with the Doctor inside, and that's it. He's off to the beach. But then you realise that the hydrogen inrush, that was it. Yes. But then you realise that no, that was just in fact a small piece of the plan. Yeah, because even though the Master seems quite miffed, he's like, "That's impossible," when he sees the TARDIS appear on the
show me.
Yeah. He just, that lasts for about a second, it feels like, because then he's just sort of grinning again. He's like, "Oh yeah, I've got a backup plan in the back pocket, so this one's going to be a slow burn though."
This is going to be a belter.
Yeah. But it's a shame, about the whole, what we were saying about part 3 being it does feel a little bit filler, and that plagues some of the 4-parters from Classic Who. But because they shifted the broadcast schedule, didn't they, for this series onwards? Well, for this particular series anyway. It used to go out on a Saturday or a Friday? When was it?
Saturday, I think.
Saturday, yeah. And they moved it, didn't they, to a Monday and Tuesday early evening slot. But loads of people complained because for some reason they were missing part 2. They didn't realise that part 2 was going to land the next day.
Oh, right, yeah.
So they just thought that next Monday you'd have part 2 and onwards. So a lot of people actually missed out on part 2, which is a shame because for them, they would have gone to part 1 straight to part 3, which was the bit of the filler one. So for those, because back in the day, you have to remember, some of our younger listeners, you have to remember that back then, there was no Sky Plus, there was no catch-up TV, no streaming services. It was like you watched it or you didn't.
That's right, yeah.
Or you kind of with the VHS recorders, some of them you could set a timer, but it was based on a real world clock. So it was like, later on today, I'm going to record Doctor Who. But if you didn't even know it was on the following night, that was useless as well. You just wouldn't know. Because I imagine that not a lot of people would have stuck around. Back in the day, that used to be the announcer on terrestrial television here in the UK. It used to be, tune in tomorrow for the continuation of Doctor Who, Castrovalva, all that stuff. Yeah. If you'd have just turned over or turned off as soon as the outro theme kicked in, you would have missed that.
Yeah, because they didn't used to do it over the credits like they do now.
No.
They used to wait right till the end of the thing had finished, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then they would tell you, not like now. The picture didn't shrink and then...
Exactly, yeah. They didn't do this thing. They had... Each channel had their own little ident. So when the credits finished, you then had, like, BBC used to use a lot of globes, like a spinning globe.
That's right.
With the number 1 in the back or the 2, whatever. And then the announcer would do that little bit in between shows. It wouldn't be over the credits, as you said. So yeah, it's unfortunate for those people that thought it was coming back a week later to only have missed part 2 and then think, what the bloody hell's going on here and why is it so boring? So yeah, I think they tanked it. Not tanked it. They changed it because it tanked so hard, and not good.
No, I was going to say, what is going on with the Master and Adric though? In that's another thing that's just bizarre. It's almost quite creepy, isn't it? The fact he's got Adric sort of spun up in this metal web, and the little why does he need this little ramp to rise him up and down? Why does he bother with it? Why doesn't he just leave the ramp up? Because I don't know if you've seen the studio footage of this, mate, but so there's no talking from the moment he leaves the floor until he doesn't talk again until he gets on eye level with Adric. It's because if you watch the studio footage, that ramp was so blimmin' noisy in the studio. So it's got like a motor that they couldn't do any dialogue until he gets to the top, so that they could dub out the awful sound. It's so loud as well. I watched a little bit of the studio footage. It's like, so I'm coming up to see you, Adric. And then you hear Fiona Cummings go and speak, and he carries on the scene. It's so funny.
It feels like longer though, doesn't it?
Oh, it feels like forever.
The ramp feels like it's going up for a while. It reminds me of...
Why can't you have some stairs?
It reminds me of anyone that's seen the Austin Powers movies. There's a couple of scenes where Dr. Evil's like messing around with his chair. Like the dialogue stops and he's trying to raise his chair up and it's going up and down for ages. It feels like it's happening forever.
Yeah.
And then it feels like that kind of... obviously it's unintentional, but it's very comedic kind of... Well, we've built this now. so we're going to bloody
Yes.
use it. Yeah.
That's exactly what I think must have happened.
Yeah.
They were like, well, because you would think the director would say, do you know what, that's unusable. Let's just start the scene with the master at the top. Like, we don't need to see him rise up. But no, I can only assume they were like, well, we've spent all this money on this thing with this motor. We need to use it. Oh, okay then. Because
They do it
why
twice
else
as
would
well.
you use it? Yeah, I know. Got to get their money's worth. But those scenes are unintentionally funny anyway. I just think, I swear you can see Matthew Waterhouse laughing as well. I'm sure he doesn't realise he's in shot at one point. I think it's the first or second time the Master's rising up on the ramp to talk to him. I swear you can just see Matthew Waterhouse laughing at him, as if to say. And then as soon as he gets to the top, he goes back into character. He's like serious. I don't think he knew it was on camera.
Yeah.
Because either that or he just couldn't hold it. I mean, you can understand it. Maybe he just couldn't hold in the laughter. I wouldn't have been able to, I don't think.
I wasn't a fan of Anthony Ainley in this one, mate.
Really?
Yeah, and it's not because anything towards Anthony Ainley. I think he's a good master, great master. I just felt that he was written to be really comic booky, if that makes sense.
I do know what you mean. I mean, I like him in it, but I do get what you're saying. He is written to be panto villain. All the
Exactly
laughter
that, yeah.
and the sort of... He's written to be over the top, isn't he?
Yeah, and he doesn't do anything either. I mean, he doesn't do anything physically, because if you think about the scenes that he's in throughout the entire story, he's either just standing still, he's just on the spot standing still, talking to Adric when he's in the big web thing, or he's knocking about very slowly as the Portreeve. But then when he comes out of his disguise as the Portreeve, you think then that there's going to be a bit of it would get a bit tasty at that point. But he just kind of wobbles around on the spot like...
That's what I mean. He's got this elaborate plan, and then what does he do? He just... Yeah, I do know exactly what you mean.
You can't
I will see your face one last time.
Yeah, you can't see this, listener. Adam can see me because we're on Skype video, but I'm kind of bending my knees and just rocking backwards and forwards with my hands out.
It's like a chicken.
But that's what he does, though, and he never runs after anybody. He doesn't go to slap anyone, and he doesn't do anything really. And I think the most he ever does is he thinks that the Doctor's inside the whatchamacallit,
The Zero Cabinet.
Yeah, so he's like, Doctor, come out, sort of thing, and then he, in anger, he sort of throws it on
little weird poker, doesn't he? To try and get into it as well. It's like, what's that?
Yeah, it's like
surely the Master would have some sort of, where's his tissue compression
exactly
thingy?
Yeah.
Like, he's got this tiny little poker trying to get into the cabinet. It's crazy.
Yeah, I thought it was a crowbar at first, but it's just this little weird, And then in anger, he just throws it on the floor, and we know that they, filled it with books and stuff.
Yeah.
And even then, he's just on the spot. He's just wiggling around, and yeah. So I love Anthony Ainley. Don't get me wrong, but I felt like the Master in this one, he was just really panto for the sake of it. Like he's in terms of on paper, looking at the story on paper, it should be like the Doctor's on the ropes. And everybody is on the ropes throughout the entire thing because of his plan. But it feels like he's not really taken seriously. Like the only person that's really sort of up against it is Adric, really. Because Adric's the one that's been captured and he's being held against his will. And the Master's really manipulating him to a point. And although Adric is able to reach out a couple of times to Nyssa and stuff, really he's just... There's no way for Adric to escape, really. He has to be rescued. So Adric's really, for me, the only person that feels any kind of proper threat from the Master. Everyone else, even when Castrovalva's kind of imploding on itself and we have that recursion thing going on, even then it's just like a carry-on film where they're just sort of running around the same set. That kind of Benny Hill joke. I was
going to say, if you put the music on, that'd be hilarious.
Yeah. So it doesn't really feel like, even though on paper, like I said, his plan is pretty brilliant, it doesn't feel like it's
very well
executed
thought out. Yeah.
On screen kind of thing. It just, because I think we're more concerned and the viewer's more drawn into the whole regeneration thing rather than defeating the Master. That's the vibe that I get from it. Now, that's not to say that I think it puts a downer on the story, because like I said, I do give it a thumbs up. I think it's a good it's a good watch in a weird way. I don't know why it's a good watch. But yeah, I just wasn't overly taken with Anthony Ainley, dude. Not because of him, but just how he was written.
Yeah, no, I think you made a good point there. I've never, no, I do agree with you to an extent. Although I like him in it. Yeah, you're right. He's not at the top of his game, is he? I mean, his disguise is rubbish. Poor Treve. I mean, well, actually, it's not rubbish. I think it's just that Anthony Ainley is so recognisable, even when he's under loads and loads of prosthetics. I don't know if it's the voice or his eyes. It seems it's really difficult to hide him under any disguise without it being obvious. I doubt there were many people that didn't guess that the poor Treve was the master. I would be surprised. I don't know. Back in the day, maybe, but as soon as he comes on screen, you're like, here he is. He's going to whip that fake beard off any minute, and he's going to do a cackly laugh. It's all going to go wrong.
What did you think to the effect, though? Because he doesn't just take a mask off or a fake beard, does he? They do this weird...
I didn't like it.
Back and forward. So he's obviously filmed that scene twice. Yeah. One with the costume, one without. And then they do a very, very quick half-second cut that kind of flashes between the two. That was... I'd
have preferred it if he just ripped the beard off, to be honest. It didn't really work.
I think it was trying to insinuate that he had properly embodied this old person and he was coming back to his proper self rather than he was his proper self with just a fake beard and hair and a wig and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think the bit where he tries to escape, I've always found that a bit weird as well. You know, the bit where the master's trying to escape, he's chasing after the Doctor, and then all the people from Castrovalva are all sort of tugging at his clothes and dragging him back in. There's something a bit creepy about that. I don't know. That scene's just, I don't know. It's just the way they're all sort of all over him, and it's I don't mean it in a it's done badly. I always find that scene quite strange for some reason. It's just weird to see the master being manhandled in that way, because, like you said, he's normally so powerful, isn't he?
Yes.
And it's just strange. I'll tell you what I did think was I've watched this quite a few times, and I've always thought Peter was finding his feet very much in this episode, but actually he's a lot better than I remembered. A lot better, actually. I think when I think of Peter in this story, I always think to myself, it's his first introductory story, even though he filmed it third, I think. So he is finding his feet. But I think actually I'm just thinking of the scenes when he's doing the impressions of the other Doctors, because I think in those scenes he doesn't quite pull it off, if you know what I mean. He's not quite, it's a little bit cringy, but actually for the rest of this story he's actually on very good form. So for example, when he gets put in the Zero Room to begin with, and he's finally stopped sort of falling over, he sort of almost slips straight into being the Doctor, doesn't he? He's like, right, you can close the door. No, it works a lot better with the door shut. And he's sort of being quite authoritative. And there's a bit where he's getting quite angry about something. And I thought, actually, Peter's really nailing these scenes. He's actually really good when he's, allowed to be the Doctor, his Doctor sort of thing. So, I was quite impressed by Peter's performance in it. And as I said, the lovely scene at the end when he's trying to remember and he's like, where's Adric? And he's really sort of, at the forefront of the scenes, pushing the scenes forward. And I thought actually he really has come into his own. But like I said, it wasn't the first story he filmed. I think the first one he filmed was Forward to Doomsday, wasn't it?
That's right.
They did them out of order, didn't they? Which must have been a bit strange. I know Fiona Cummins said that she had a problem because this was the third story they filmed. Sarah Sutton and Janet Fielding had sort of bonded quite a lot and were getting on really well. And with Peter, and she was saying, look, you guys, you've got to go back to the start. You've got to remember, you haven't really got to know this Doctor yet, so you can't have that. You've got to act differently. You've got to act as if you don't really know him. You're too, you know what I mean? You're already, the chemistry is already there, and you haven't got that yet. So that must have been quite strange to sort of think, oh yeah, we've got to act as if we don't really know this guy, when in actual fact they got to know each other quite well, because I think they'd filmed 2 other stories. So that's a bit weird.
Yeah, I can imagine it would have been very easy for them to just plod along with that kind of banter between them, because they'd got to know each other very well at that point. If this was the 4th one. Was it 3rd or 4th to be filmed? One of the 2.
I think it's 3rd, yeah.
So, I mean, fair play to Fiona Cummins for reminding him of that fact that we're going back to the beginning now. You know, you've never seen this Doctor before. You can't be like, you know, having all the bants and laughs and stuff. So, yeah,
I think it's good she picked up on that, to be fair. Do you think it flows on well from Logopolis? Like, do you think the way it picks up straight from it? Because I think at one point they were gonna start the season with a totally different story, which wouldn't pick up from Logopolis at all. It would just go straight into the Peter as the new Doctor. It's kind of like, you know, as if he was already established. There was going to be none of this post-regeneration stuff. Which do you think that would have worked better, or do you think it's good? Because I personally have always loved the fact that it starts straight from where Logopolis leaves off. I love the fact that we continue the story and we get to see Peter become the Doctor. But do you think because I think nowadays they might have done it differently. I think, you know, they would want to get straight into the story so that viewers aren't bogged down with too much baggage from the previous story. But I must admit, I think it carries on really well from Logopolis, even though I think it's filmed in a different location. It does look slightly different if you look hard enough, but it doesn't bother me, any of that stuff. Like I find the beginning quite funny when Tegan steals the ambulance and all that, and Adric gets into the most hilarious ruckus. Yeah. It's so ridiculous. I find the beginning really fun.
Take your hands off me.
He's having the right old scrap, isn't he? Yeah. But yeah, I think it picked up well from Logopolis. I like the fact it carries on. I'll tell you what I would have liked, though. They do mention in the production notes, so when Peter's really struggling with regeneration in episode 2, I think it is, when the Zero Room is jettisoned, which is a great idea. I love that. So they go in it and it's gone. I thought, that's good. Apparently he was supposed to be starting to get really bad, and they were going to make him up to look like the Watcher. So he was sort of transitioning back into the Watcher. So they were going to paint his face white and have a few veins to make him look really... Now, I think they should have done that, because that would have, A, been a great throwback to the Watcher, and B, it would have added a bit of more drama to the fact that the regeneration was failing. And I wonder why they didn't do that. It was probably a time thing.
Probably.
But wouldn't that have been great? So the bit where they go in the Zero Room and she opens the doors and it's gone, and then one of the doors falls off, and Peter's kind of slumped in the wheelchair because the regeneration is really failing. Remember that scene?
Yeah.
That's when he would have started to apparently look quite white and pale and start to look like the Watcher again. And I really wish they'd done that. I think that would have added a lot more drama to it, actually.
That would have been cool, actually, because the whole point of the regen that they only pick up a few times, I think, in all of Doctor Who, is that there's no guarantee that that's going to be successful. There are times where if the Doctor doesn't regenerate, quote unquote, properly, he could die. There's no guarantee that he'll just automatically, survive anything. So that would have added to the whole, is he going to properly regenerate? Is he going to, or is that because if sort of fading in and out and becoming the Watcher again and that stuff, that's very cool. I'd love to have seen that. But yeah, it must have been a money time thing, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure there's some reason for it. Even if they just did it subtly, like you could just see him getting a bit white, and I don't know. I just think it's a great idea. I wish they'd follow through with that, but probably a time thing, I guess. And they probably just felt like, we don't need it. We can just show that it's failing by having him slumped in the chair. I don't know. I'm sure there were reasons, but I wish they had done it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in terms of, to answer your question, should we have had kicked off the new series with a new Doctor with just an established Doctor? So he's already regened like however many weeks, months, years before, and the first episode we see he's already just rocking and rolling. I think there are merits to both of that, because we've seen, I think especially in modern Doctor Who, they've always transitioned, haven't they, from the parting Doctor or actor, and then the story for the next actor taking over has always been exactly where the last one left off. So we've always had that. The exception to that, though, is Eccleston, and that worked really well, because obviously it would have been really weird, wouldn't they, to try and in hindsight we now know that there was the War Doctor involved, and that was the whole thing. So obviously they weren't even thinking about the War Doctor at that point, because Moffat wasn't involved, but they couldn't have really gone back and got they could have done maybe, but they couldn't have gone back and plucked a regeneration scene out of nowhere, it just would have been a bit strange to, do you know what I mean? To try and fill in the gap almost. So I think there are merits to both, because when Eccleston came on screen, I think there were a couple of lines that insinuated that it was a fresh regen, because he looks in the mirror in Rose's apartment, doesn't he, and notices his ears and stuff.
That's right, yeah.
So it kind of hints at he's been this Doctor just for a short period of time. He's still sort of looking at himself in a new light kind of thing. But then at the same time, if you take those away from it, he's still, just explodes onto the screen as the Doctor already. We don't have to see him become the Doctor like we have with Castrovalva and some other stories. So that works really well too. But I think for the most part, I like seeing, especially Davison, become, sort of leave, because we have to remember also that back in the day, because Tom Baker's legacy, even straight after he left, was so strong, in a lot of people's eyes, he was the Doctor and that was it. I think they needed that period of time where both visually and I guess metaphorically, Peter Davison's Doctor needed to come out of that era of Who. And it would have been more difficult to do that if he just popped on screen as the Doctor already, because everyone would have been scratching their heads like, well, what happened at the end of Logopolis? What happened there? How did he escape? What was going on? And, where's the Master and all that stuff? So it would have been of a head scratcher. So, yeah, I like the way they did it. I like the fact that you see Davison, luckily, having already filmed a bunch of stories already, sort of become the Doctor. And speaking of the Doctor, this was the first time that I think Davison actually insisted on it, that they changed the wording of the Doctor in the credits and stuff to the Doctor rather than Doctor Who.
Is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they did it again when Eccleston come back. So when Eccleston's in 2005, when that kicked off, in the credits, it's Doctor as in DR, full stop Who. It's Doctor Who like that, like it was in the previous classic years. And then when Tennant took over, he then, and the production, they all said it needs to be the Doctor. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I think Peter felt a lot of pressure, which, to be fair, you got to give him some credit, really. To take over from Tom Baker must have been quite daunting, because, like you said, he was so established as the Doctor. He'd been the Doctor for so many years. To take over from him, and he was a young chap at the time, wasn't he, Davison? I think he must have been the youngest Doctor.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot riding on his shoulders, and I think I've got hats off to him for going for it. I think he was worried at the time about doing it, but I think he's quoted as saying he just couldn't say no to Doctor Who. He's like, I don't think, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to regret it if I don't give it a go. So hats off to Davison for actually taking the part. And I think he does great stuff with it. I mean, he does take a bit of time to find his feet a little bit. I think but we always say it, by Castrovalva, he's absolutely rocking. Not Castrovalva, sorry. Kayser Androzani, he's absolutely rocking as the Doctor, which of course is his last story. But, he often gets sort of overlooked, I think, Davison, as being this fluffy Doctor that was very human-like. But actually, when you go back and watch some of his stories, Peter does some great stuff with his Doctor, and I think he is underrated. I really do think that. I think he's got some great characteristics, which I think he brought, because they do say that him and JNT had very different ideas about the character of the Doctor. So JNT did, I think Peter said he didn't really get any advice on how to play it, but he had some ideas that JNT sort of vetoed. Can't remember what they were. So I think Peter just wanted to tread that line between being sort of a bit grumpy like Hartlowish, but then having this sort of a lot of humour to hide it and stuff, and which is what we sort of associate with the Doctor. So I think Peter was going down the right track. But yeah, I think he finds a good line between those two. He's one of those Doctors, I think, that I always like it when Peter's Doctor suddenly starts laying down the law. Like, he is quite easygoing, so it's quite cool when he really suddenly flips and sort of has a go at like Adric or Tegan. It's it does remind me a bit of Hartnell when he does that. He has got this sort of irascible side to him.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think people forget about with Peter's Doctor. They just think he's Mr. Nice. I think that the atmosphere on set as well, you can tell that it's a much happier time filming on set. You can just see that the tensions from Tom. I love Tom Baker, but he will admit himself that there was a lot of tension towards the end of his era. And I think the cast, to an extent, may have just been treading on eggshells a lot of the time around Tom. I think with Peter, you can tell that it's brought in a totally different atmosphere. The cast got on very well. We all know that. And he was quite an easygoing person to work with. And so you can see there's a much more lightness of performance from the actors as well. So definitely. I think Peter brought that as well, that sort of much calmer, much more relaxed atmosphere to be around. And I think one person in particular is certainly noticing it, and that's Matthew Waterhouse, who seems to have let the reins off a bit. He seems to have found almost a new confidence, but to me he's gone a little bit too far the other way. So when he first sort of started, we said his performance was a bit all over the place. And then I can't remember what story we were reviewing where we said he seems to have found his character and was quite good. And then we get to Castrovalva, and I think he's almost got a bit too confident, because some of his scenes, he's way over the top. Like the scene where he's talking to Nyssa in the mirror. He's like, no, don't turn around, don't look now, and he's really trying to give a great performance, but actually he's just gone way too far. It's just like, no, tone it down. Fiona Cummins perhaps should have said, Matthew, it's great, I love your enthusiasm, but just tone it down a little bit. It's not the best performance of Matthew in this one, I have to be honest. And
he probably feels like now that he hasn't got that intense stare from Tom Baker,
what I mean.
And the shackles,
he can just do what he wants.
He can fire it up a little bit, but
there's a bit where the doctor says to him, do you see anything you don't recognise that could get us out here? And he looks around, and then he goes, oh yeah, over there, and points to the direction he hasn't even looked in. He's like, oh, over there, some hills. And they're like, what is it? It's a very enthusiastic performance from Matthew, and I do, I like Adric, but he's a bit he's trying a bit too hard in this, I think. It feels like he's gonna, this is my time to shine, sort of thing.
Yes, yeah, and you can definitely tell that the atmosphere was better as well, because in the final, at the end of part 4, when he's freed from the web and the imprisonment and stuff like that, when they were filming those, the character needed to look kind of, he'd been wrung out basically, he'd been imprisoned, and because his constant calculations and stuff like that, he's basically meant to look completely knackered and tired, and apparently he achieved that by accident, because he'd been on an absolute bender the night before.
Oh yeah, that's right, yeah, that's it, yeah,
with the crew and stuff, and he was so hungover, he was hanging so much, he was so pale, because I remember thinking like, wow, he looks really, when I rewatched it I was like, wow, he looks really quiet and withdrawn in those really final bits. Yeah. But it's because he was so hanging. And then at the end, where the Doctor and Tegan are talking about, when they get back to the TARDIS and it's on a slant, and he's like, who landed this sort of thing? And he's talking to Tegan about that. Apparently, Matthew Waterhouse is 20 feet away, throwing up behind a tree.
Yeah, he was really, really bad.
So sick.
I think it was J&T and Janet Fielding got him drunk the night before, because I think he'd recently turned 18, and they were like, come on, you can legally drink now, down some of these. And he was really, really hungover apparently. Yeah. He looks as white as a ghost as well. That little scene where they're jogging, I can just imagine that, like, we've all been hungover, and imagine like having to do a scene where, could we do another take of you guys running up this through the forest? I bet he was like, oh god, I just can't do it, I can't do it. Yeah, but you can see it in his face. He looks really rough.
Campari apparently, a night filled with, I can't stand the stuff myself, so I can see why
had it.
He was hanging, but bless him. What did you think to before we move on to talking about Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton, what do you think to the idea that, in going back to the subject of, should they have continued with how they did it, where they sort of they showed Peter Davison sort of easing his way into his own era, stuff like that, or established. They wanted to have Elizabeth Sladen and Louise Jameson come on board for the first couple of episodes, so that they could kind of ease the audience out of that era, and to do a bit of a handover, if you like. So show some familiarity from Tom Baker's era, and then sort of have that, sort of easing into Davison's era. But they both turned it down, not because they didn't want to do it, but because they were just scheduled and filming, doing their own thing and other stuff. They couldn't do it. But that would have been a real kind of twisty, weird thing to happen, wouldn't it?
I can't see how that would have worked. What, they were going to bring them into this story, or would that have been in the other story? Or
not in this particular story, but apparently the first block, the first 2 or 3 stories, they would have they wanted them to come back and just provide a bit of familiarity for the the down in the dumps, got the blues, Tom Baker, Doctor Who fans that were like, this doesn't feel like Doctor Who, and then they brought these people in. It's like, oh, it feels like Doctor Who now. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I get you. I don't know. It would have been interesting. I don't think it needs it, though. I mean, I always think if you get it right, be brave enough to stand on your own 2 feet. I sometimes think, you underestimate the audience by doing something like that, thinking, oh, we've got to do this to please the fans, otherwise they're all going to walk away. But I think if your Doctor and companions are strong enough that you've got, and I think, we call this the crowded TARDIS team, but I think they're great characters. I think they're strong enough to carry the series with Peter's Doctor. So I don't think it needed them, is what I'm trying to say. It probably would have been nice. It would have been, I'm sure if we had episodes with them in, it'd be episodes we enjoyed. But I don't think it needed it. I think it works fine as it is. As I said, I think it is a crowded TARDIS team, but I really like this TARDIS team. Even Adric, I think he's an interesting character. I like the fact he can fly the TARDIS. I mean, I know he's a bit cocky and all that, but I do find him fun. Like, he's always ready to get stuck into a scrap. Like, he's always ready to get stuck in. So, and I think Nyssa and Tegan work really well together as well. I think it's a really nice relationship between those two. Inevitably, you're gonna find that writers find it hard to give them all something to do, which does happen, obviously. But I think because the characters are kind of strong anyway, it doesn't always seem that bad, if you know what I mean. Like, even if they're not doing anything, like Tegan often just moans, so there's just some episodes where she doesn't do anything but just walk around moaning, and she might do the odd thing here and there. But I still find the character Tegan fun in those stories because that's Tegan. She's just like, I think she even moans about running in this one, doesn't she? At the end, she's like, oh, had enough of that sort of thing. So yeah, I just think they're strong characters anyway.
Yeah, and I think they have a good dynamic with the Doctor, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Even though we've mentioned numerous times about, like you said, this being the crowded TARDIS team and stuff, and I think when you've got the dynamic right, it can work, and this did work for the majority of the time. However, when we had Jodie's era, when we had 3 companions, it just didn't work. Well, it didn't work more than it did work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? It's like the odd episode here and there. It would be cool, but the majority of the time you had, I don't know, you had 1 or sometimes 2 of the companions just in the background, not really doing much, not contributing.
They weren't
so much.
Interested in enough characters. I think that's the thing with Adric, Nyssa and Tegan. You've got 3 very different characters. They're all interested in their own way, whereas in the Jodie era, they kind of, to me personally anyway, they weren't that interesting as characters enough to carry the screen time. But it's weird because I think you just said that the dynamic is there between them and the Doctor, and I think that's very true. So Adric, Nyssa and Tegan and the 5th Doctor, there is a real good chemistry between all of those characters. Even the Doctor getting a bit annoyed with Adric now and again, there's something between all of those characters enough to sort of keep the momentum. I don't think it would have worked with Tom's Doctor, for example. I think if you had Tegan, Nyssa and Adric and the 4th Doctor, I think you would have struggled a lot more to find stuff for them to do, because I think Tom's Doctor was more domineering as a leading character.
Yeah,
it
agree.
Was, whereas Peter sort of shares the screen time more with these characters, and I think it works pretty well for the most part.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree on that, dude.
Yeah, so that's why I think they're a good TARDIS team. Even though it often gets said it's a crowded TARDIS, I think it does work for the most part, I think.
Yeah, and I think Janet Fielding is like because we often say that Sarah Sutton's performance is a little bit withdrawn sometimes, and she's a bit quiet. I think it's just her nature, not as the character Nyssa, but I think just Sarah Sutton herself she might be completely different. We don't know her, but she just strikes me as being like a quietish kind of person, and a little bit not as fiery as somebody like Janet Fielding. Who's, do you know what I mean? So
totally different. Yeah.
So there's a natural, even before they step into character, there's a natural dynamic there where you've got Tegan being very mouthy and complaining a lot and all that stuff, and Nyssa just being the more quiet kind of. She's more of an observer rather than a contributor in a degree. It takes, it's often down to Davison's doctor saying to her, right, you need to go and investigate that, or you need to go and build that, or think about that. Whereas Tegan's more like, well, I'm getting the hell out of it. She's off doing whatever she wants to do and stuff. And Adric's just more like, he's the peacemaker. He's like, oh no, don't, the doctor didn't mean it. Let's just go and then at other times he's more like arguing with the doctor because he doesn't agree, and they have a little tiff and stuff. So like you were saying, the dynamic is there, and it's consistent across a lot of stories as well. You know what you're going to get with these four. So although it's crowded, it does somehow work. Not all the time, but most of the time it does somehow work. It's and it also it makes you think about, like you were saying, if this was the fourth Doctor and we had these three companions, it wouldn't have worked.
I don't think it would have. No, not long term.
Yeah, because I've not thought about that hardly at all. Like, what would it be like if Tom had stayed on another series, and this was Tom with, these peeps and stuff? It would have been.
Because these guys feel like a team, don't they?
Yeah.
That's the thing. The Doctor and these guys, they feel like a team. Whereas I think if they were with Tom's Doctor, he just did, he liked to do stuff himself. So he did. I'm not saying he didn't work well with other people in terms of his Doctor. I mean, not him as an actor, but his Doctor just always was a bit of a solo. He might have the odd, like with Romana, they worked quite well together, but most of the time the Doctor just does his own thing and the companions help out. With Davison's Doctor, they're much more of a team, I think, these guys. So I think that's probably why they'd work better. I do feel sorry for poor old Sarah Sutton having to go in that lake, though. She really, I genuinely thought she'd fell down. She looks like she just literally drops down that slope. Bless her, doesn't she? When she goes in the water.
Oh, yeah.
Gets soaked. I mean, she literally does slip down the side of the... I don't think they'd do that now. They wouldn't say, go and slide down that slope into the water and... Yeah, poor old Sarah Sutton.
Yeah, well, both of them actually, Sarah Sutton and Janet Fielding, they do get lumbered with the heavy lifting in this story, really, because they have to lug around to lug around the coffin.
Yeah,
which is probably not very heavy. It's probably made of plywood or MDF or something. It's probably quite light, but they're carrying that thing through various fields and overgrown stuff, and then you have them
Janet was a bit. Yeah, Janet wasn't very happy about going up the rocks. I don't think she's... Because they were, once you're on the top of them, I think were a bit high. They weren't like, that high, but they were high enough to be a bit dodgy, which again, health and safety probably wouldn't allow them to just go on, get up the top there. We need to get this shot. They probably wouldn't have done that. So yeah, I'll tell you, while I remember this, there is another thing about the story I like, another bit, which is when we first meet the people from Logopolis. I always love it when we get a bit of world building in Doctor Who. That's why I like Paradise Towers, because we get a sense of a different civilization. So I like the bit when they get to the Castrovalva, and for a lot of the time you think that there's something amiss, like the characters do as well. So Tegan thinks the people on Castrovalva are bad, doesn't she? She's like, they had the Zero Cabinet, they're trying to do the... And you start to think as a viewer, are these people actually going to turn out to be baddies? In particular, the guy that looks like a villain. Who's the guy? He's the one from Rent-A-Ghost. Can't remember his name. Is it Derek Waring? He's the guy in black. he's purposely sort of made to look
like
a villain.
Yeah.
But actually, he's a good guy. So there's a lovely scene where the Doctor sort of just puts his hand to beckon him round the corner, and I think you assume it's the Master, but it's the Doctor, and he says, "Look, I know you're not a bad guy, and I need you to help me." And so sort of suddenly you realise that actually they are just innocently, doing these things. They're not trying to sort of do anything bad towards the Doctor. But I like that. I like the fact there's a little bit of uncertainty of are these people good or are they bad? Is this all part of the trap, or are they part of the plan, sort of thing? So that's quite a good bit of writing. And I like Michael Sheard as well, who pops up a lot in Doctor Who. He gives a nice performance.
Murgrave, yeah. He's a great little actor, Michael Sheard, and a really nice guy as well. Yeah, he's the one that pulls the Master back in at the end, isn't he? He stays behind, and he's like, "You're not getting away. You've caused too much, terrible thing." So yeah, that was good. And Shardovan, who's played by Derek Waring, who you mentioned, he's the guy that I thought he's the key. He's the baddie in disguise. Because there's a bit in the story where Murgrave goes up to him and says, the Doctor's leaving. He's insistent that he wants to go and stuff. And then Shardovan's like, "Well, we will have to make sure that doesn't happen." And you think, what's going on here? Why doesn't he want the Doctor to leave? Obviously, it's all kind of, everything's kind of warped at this point. They're not really sure why they're doing stuff. But I thought then, like, oh no, are these like baddies? Because when you see them in the hunting stuff near the big, in episode 2, when they're in all the feathers and the crazy costumes and stuff, you think, like, they do look quite menacing. It's like these guys are in trouble.
That's what I mean. It's quite good, isn't it? They do play up to that quite well, that you think these are going to be like some sort of new alien or baddie or creature, but it's actually not. They're just innocent, people, and actually they're all caught up in this trap, really, aren't they?
Yeah, because they don't know they're doing it. There's a really good scene where the Doctor says to Murgrave, he says, "Look, draw a map of Castrovalva as best you can on the back of this mirror."
I love that scene. Yeah.
He said, "And now, mark out where your chemist, your pharmacies are." And he's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, and he doesn't, and his brain can't compute. So that's when you realise, like, oh crap, like these guys are caught up in it as well. They don't know that everything's being warped around them, and they can't fight it because they can't realise. So then that's when you realise, actually, right, there's no wrongdoing going on. This is just all manipulated by the Master via Adric, who's doing the computations to make all of this. It's quite clever. It's a pretty clever script when you pick apart some of it and go to at least one level deep anyway. But when you try and think about it too hard, like we said at the beginning, it does get a little bit. I
was going to say, I know Bidmead comes into a bit of criticism, but I always think, well, even when the ideas don't always come off, I think at least he's coming up with some interesting ideas. And I think that's what sort of works well in Castrovalva and Logopolis, is that although some of the ideas are a bit out there and a bit odd and all that, they're interesting ideas that you can sort of excite the imagination. So that I think you can sort of overlook some of the ridiculousness of some of it, because you think, well, actually that's quite an interesting concept, so I think Bidmead had some great ideas. He goes in a bit with the technogabble. I think he loves stuff like, what was that thing you were trying to remember earlier about the TARDIS overheating? He loves throwing in stuff like that. And but that's, I don't mind that sort of thing.
No, it's not too bad.
What did you think of Fiona's direction, by the way? Did you think it was well directed?
I was going to say, I think in terms of production stuff, you can tell we're getting into that part of, as you progress through Doctor Who, throughout the classic years, you do have these kind of ebbs and flows where all of a sudden there'll be a story and you think, bloody hell, they had a little bit of money here because, the sets look really good, or they've gone out location loads, or there's some good effects. And then you have this kind of sort of downward kind of thing that happens for a couple of years in Who, where you think, right, the BBC have really sort of clutched on the money at this point. I think this is kind of a little bit of a slippery slope for me. From this point onwards with Doctor Who, you can really tell that the BBC are reining in a lot of the budget. And I think that's, I think have you read John Nathan Turner's book? I'm pretty sure you've.
What, The Life and Times of...
Yeah,
I've read it. Yeah,
I think a couple of the occasions where he's really flipped his lid is about him not having as much budget and stuff like that other shows at the BBC were getting at the time, and it was a constant battle for him when he was trying to speak to the execs at the BBC and saying, look, the ratings are still good, I need more, I need to be able to produce a good show, sort of thing. And they never budged, obviously, and he always had a shoestring budget and stuff. But for me anyway, from Davison's era onwards, you can really tell that apart from the odd little moment here and there, they were really reined in on money, because the sets look quite cheap. If that, even though they had to, like the big fireplace that was the Master's TARDIS at one point, and some of the staircases and other bits and pieces, and even like the big metal web thing that Adric was.
Well, that's just the Zero Room painted black.
Exactly, mate. Yeah, and
it's just reused. Yeah,
all of those metal bars and rods and stuff. You can see all the welding marks on it and stuff. They just very quickly knocked these things up because they had no money, and the sets are quite small as well. They are quite contained. So production wise, I think they're really sort of getting in their heads around, right, okay, we're never going to get any more money from the Beeb now, so we're going to have to be sort of innovative with how we do this stuff. So I think with some of the sets, a lot of it's meant to look like stone and marble and all that sort of stuff, and they've tried to weather it and stuff, but it just starts to look really cheap now. Whereas before, from Baker's era and then previously, although you knew it was cheap, there was a certain charm to that, if that makes sense. Whereas now it's like, we know it's cheap, but you've tried to make it look not cheap, but as a result it looks cheaper than what. Yeah, I hope I'm making sense with that.
I think I know what you mean. I was going to say I do like the sets, but yeah, they definitely do, yeah. There's definitely a budget thing here. I mean, you said about the ratings. This is getting 10.4 million viewers. Around that sort of mark. So still, like you said, still getting great viewing figures. I think wasn't it to do with the budget as well? Was the department that made Doctor at the time was it children's department or something? So that meant it got a smaller budget. I don't know. There was all sorts of reasons, but yeah, the way I would put it is they're getting the most out of what they really make the most out of what they've got. I think and credit to J&T for that. Really, they really managed to get the best out of very little that they were had to work with, I think. No, I agree, mate. Yeah, and the next couple of stories onwards, I mean, what's the next one? Four to Doomsday. That ended up raking in, I think it's like 9 million viewers per episode. And then the next one after that, what was that? Kinder. I'm pretty sure that was like 8 something, 9 point something. So in reality, the BBC should have been like, this is, I don't know what it was about the execs around this, because I think it stemmed from a lot of them just thinking that this was a kid's show still, like you were saying, it was part of the kids. Yeah, they just didn't have any time for it, did they?
Yeah, and they didn't, I feel anyway, that very few of them took it seriously as a proper science fiction show, so it ended up just being this, Anyway, we can talk for ages about that stuff, but...
Yeah, I was going to say, this season ends with Time Flight, and by then you can really see the budget. I mean, that's when even Peter, I think, said, didn't he, that when he saw the sets for Time Flight, he just thought, what the hell's going on? I've got to get out of this. And I think, is that when he decided to leave, or was it the next season? I can't remember. But yeah, even by the end of the season, money had completely dried up. And just going back to Fiona Cummings, because I thought the direction was good. I think she tries a few things. There's a couple of nice shots of Tegan and Nyssa at the TARDIS, where she sort of framed it, where you've got a slightly different angle and stuff. So I think she tries a few things. But Peter Davison says in the making of for this story that he thought he liked Fiona a lot, but he felt like she was a bit old-fashioned in her style, and he uses that phrase which we always use. He says she was very much point and shoot, and I think there are some scenes like that, in particular in episode 3, when we just get a lot of walking around and the shots are very static. It's just shots of literally just someone walking from one end of the screen to the other. So yeah, I don't know, there are bits where I think she's done some great stuff, but other bits, I agree with Peter Davison, perhaps a little bit static in the direction.
Yeah.
But I think overall it's all right. I think overall it's good.
No, you took the words out of my mouth with that stuff, really, did. It's very static, a lot of it. It's even when there's some, you think it's going to get a little bit, they were going to enhance the sort of action, the very few action scenes that we have. Like at the end when everything's collapsing and the master's trying to get away. Even then the camera's just at one point. It's just filming upwards and everyone's grabbing the master and stuff. And although the music kind of hypes up a bit at that point and, it does seem like it's building to something, the camera's just very much, on its Todd, just shooting in one thing. And in some respects, that can work, though, in classic Who. There is a really lovely old school feel about that, where you just have a static camera and you have a few people walking along and they're having a conversation. But I think it needs to be balanced out, though, with, some exciting stuff that happens elsewhere. But in this one, it did feel very much like that through most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of the music? You mentioned the music as well, because a lot of it I like because it's very much of its time. The all the sort of running around, and it's a little bit 70s at times. And I even like the little pipe bit, but only for about the first couple of times. It's sort of, even though I like it, by about the fifth time of hearing that little flute bit of music, starts to grate a little bit. So for the most part, I like Paddy Kingsland's score, but it does get a bit samey. And I think by episode 4, you sort of had enough of the panpipe. But for the most part, I like it. I think it suits the story very well. Yeah,
I thought so. I quite like this one, actually. Old Paddy. Yeah, with this one. Yeah, it does get a little bit samey, I agree. As you're partway through episode 3, you think, okay, I've heard that little motif now sort of 10 times already over the last couple of hours, or last hour, sorry. So it does get a wee bit samey, but it's got a nice vibe to it, though. It's not too... it's not trying to reinvent the wheel kind of thing. It's not trying to be years ahead in terms of music. It's not doing any crazy electric synthesizer stuff too much. So it's fairly balanced. It's of its time, isn't it? For sure.
Yeah, I must admit, Paddy Kingsland's scores are probably... I really like his music that he does for, this sort of era. I mean, I love the stuff in Logopolis. I think it's gorgeous. And I think this sort of carries on. Because this follows Logopolis, I think I'm glad they got him to do the music, because it does feel like it sort of bridges the two together with the music. So, I do like it. But, it just gets a bit samey.
He did a really nice... Was it Paddy that did... what was it? The Five Doctors. Did he do the Five Doctors? He did, didn't he?
I think so.
Yeah. Beautiful score for that one. It's Peter Howell. Oh, balls.
Oh, it's Peter Howell. Oh, I always thought it was Paddy Kingsland.
Yeah, I did as well. That's weird. Yeah. Anyway, the music was pretty good. It was just a bit samey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else on your notes, bud?
No, I was just having a quick peruse. No, I think I've pretty much said all I need to say on this one.
Yeah, and just very, very quickly, what do you think to Davison's costume? Because it doesn't really change, does it, throughout his era?
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually that was the other note I hadn't spoke about, the costume. It's weird, isn't it? Because it's such an odd... I don't know how they came up with the concept for Davison's costume. This cricket motif and celery on the lapel. I mean, what is it about? And yet, I really like it. And I think, again, I'm going to give credit to Peter. I think he just carries that costume well somehow. I don't know. It's ludicrous, really. To me, a bit like Colin's costume. It really shouldn't work. And I mean, I will never understand how a piece of celery gets stuck on a costume. It's just ridiculous. But there's something about it. I like it. I've always loved his beige jacket. I just love that jacket, and it really suits Peter. I don't know. He makes it work. I don't know how.
He does.
But it is a strange costume, isn't it? Like when they were designing it, like the stripy trousers, the cricket top, a beige jacket, and a piece of celery on the lapel. It's bizarre.
It's weird, isn't it? Because all of the Doctors previously, up to this point, they didn't really have, other than Tom, I suppose, they didn't really have the kind of quirkiness about them. They were just very, it was quite smart looking. It was always trousers and shoes and a long overcoat and shirts and stuff. It was always quite smart. And then I think probably with the exception of Tom's scarf, because it was exceptionally long and crazy. That was the only kind of quirky thing that we've had in costumes up to that point. So this shouldn't work. It should, because it's a change of direction. I mean, they brought it back down to earth again, didn't they? So I think Davison and Colin Baker's costumes were just weird in a good way. In a good way, they were just very weird. And then when we get to McCoy, we're back to the smart-looking, trousers and shoes, waistcoat, shirt and stuff, and a blazer or jacket. So it goes back towards that. Yeah, so just these two doctors, they just have a very quirky kind of out there costume that shouldn't work. If you described it to somebody, they'd be like, what the bloody hell does that look like then? It must look awful, but he carries it off.
I'll never understand the celery. And I don't think Peter did, because Peter hates celery. But I just don't know at what point they were sat there and said, yeah, the costume's up like 99% there. It's just missing. What's it missing? I know, celery on the lapel. That's what it's missing. And yet it wouldn't be the same without it somehow.
Yeah. Do you think that at that time they knew about, because in the case of Androzani, the celery plays a bit of an important role, doesn't it? Do you think, was that retrofitted, or do you think at the time they thought, actually, that bit of celery is going to play a part at some point? I don't know.
No, that's down to Peter Davison. I know this story. Peter said it a few times. It's Peter Davison went along with the celery on the condition that they explained it. And he got to his last story and he's like, J&T, you have not, you got to explain this celery. So so they finally did. But it's Peter that said, I'll wear it, but there's got to be a reason for it. And at some point you've got to explain it. And so they finally did. But I don't think they would have bothered if it wasn't because Peter insisted on it.
Yeah. He spat it out the first time, in this story when he munches on it. He hates it.
So do I, by the way. This is a true story. My partner tries to hide celery in my food sometimes, like I'm not going to notice.
Oh, like Mum.
And I always take it out and leave it on the side of the plate. I'm like, why do you do that? I'm not going to eat it.
Yeah. My mum used to do that with Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
It's like, Mum, these are the devil's work. Like, I can smell Brussels sprouts from 3 miles away. There's no way you're going to hide them under my nose. But anyway, Castrovalva. Let's put some scores on this. I think it's me to go first.
Yeah, you go first. Yeah.
I'm going to give this a 7, dude.
A 7.
A 7 out of 10. I think it's a good watch. I have no idea why it's a good watch, other than the obvious things of Davison's performance. I love Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton. I think they're very good. Matt Waterhouse gets a bit big for his boots, although he's kind of cool. Not really feeling Anthony Ainley, and the music's pretty good. Other than that, it's a weird watch. It's a bit slow in places, but still good.
Yeah, it's an odd one. I think enjoyment factor for me, it would be an 8, but looking at it in a critical, analysing way, it is a strange story, and it does have its faults. So I'll give it a 7.5. But I do really like it. I've always really liked Castrovalva, but I can't really go to an 8 because I consider an 8 to be a strong, you're getting near sort of 8, 9 strong story level. And I think this is good, but it is not quite there. But yeah, it's a good one. I do like it. Right,
cool. Okay, so a 7 from me and a 7.5 from him. We had some cool, we had a good number of audio reviews in this week.
Ooh,
so let's rattle through these. The first one is Mr. Joe Turner.
Castrovalva is a decent episode, but a rather weak opener for one of my favourite classic Doctors. Whilst I enjoyed seeing Peter find his Doctor and all the references to his previous incarnations, I found the story slow, with way too much talking and not enough action. I liked the first 2 episodes on the TARDIS. It is dramatic and fun. However, once we go to Castrovalva, I found myself really bored. I do like the sinister atmosphere that is generated throughout the story by the Master, and the time loop is a haunting idea. Tegan and Nyssa are very good in this story and deal with the Doctor's regeneration really well. As for Adric, however, well, he didn't really do much other than attempt to threaten the Master. Towards the end, I find Peter begins to settle into his role as a 5th Doctor and puts on a good performance. It also has some lovely imagery and beautiful location work, and the ending was satisfying seeing the Master get his comeuppance. So overall, Castrovalva is an anticlimactic opening story for the 5th Doctor that remains rather dull throughout, as well as a little too complex for its own good, and ends up giving me a headache. So I'm going to give this episode a 5 out of 10. Thank you.
5.
Headache. Oh dear.
Yeah, a bit dull and too complex for its own good, says Joe.
Also, it does wrap up quick, doesn't it? When it ended, I've forgotten how quickly it sort of is just everyone's just jogging towards TARDIS and it's all done with. It does wrap up a bit quick, this one.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much, Joe. 5 out of 10. On the evens, a 5. Moving on, this is Martin Arnold.
Castrovalva, and the same to you. Sounds like a very rude word, doesn't it? I don't know how... I sat down to talk about this episode and I don't know what to say. It's so odd. It's kind of charming, but it's an odd change of pace after Logopolis. And in fact, it starts off quite frantic with the TARDIS hurtling into Event Zero after they looked up on CFAX how to fly the thing, because of course they did. It's just so bizarre. It's just... And the Doctor spends half the episode, not himself, which is always a dicey prospect for the stories. But it strangely works, and he comes around in the end and saves everybody and defeats the Master who's built the place and is sort of pretending to be the Portreeve. And Michael Sherd is always good value. Always I enjoy seeing him in Classic Who. It's just such a strange story. It's just nothing really happens until the very end. The first and the last episode are the only episodes where anything really happens. I like that it follows on directly from Logopolis, and I like the sort of angst that the Doctor's going through because his regeneration is going a bit weird. It's kind of a weird little bookend. I quite like it. I love the music of this particular era, and I like the high concept stuff that they've tried, but it is just techno-babble nonsense. But it's charming with it, and so I would give this a 7 out of 10. It's not everyone's favourite, but it is a classic in every sense of the word. Cheerio and Castrovalva all round.
CFAX, showing your age there. Gosh.
CFAX, yeah, crikey.
CFAX, another CFAX.
Yeah, so I think you liked it, Martin, but nothing really happens until the end. Yeah, which is not too far off the point, really. But yeah. Well, did you give it a 7, I think, Martin?
7, he gave it.
Yeah. Nice one, Martin. Thank you very much for your review. Moving on then. This is TARDISNet 66.
Castrovalva, I think, is a really strong post-generation story. What I really like is that although we had seen the Dots adjust into a new body before, this is the first story to explore regeneration. I feel this is the introductory story is about regeneration, with regeneration going wrong causing chaos, which puts the focus on the companions who have to look after the Doctor. And from that, we get a lot of time inside the TARDIS. I also like the concept of Castrovalva and the idea of this created world by the Master. I like how that mystery unravels. I don't like Anthony Ainley's Master, but although he is the villain in this story, his role is minimal, and this is one of my personal favourite disguises for the Master and the Portreeve. My main complaint will be that although a good story, it isn't a good display and a good showcase for Peter Davison's Doctor, and you don't get a strong enough idea of who he is due to lack of screen time focused on him, and I feel it's not particularly accessible as a story. I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
7.
Yeah, I must admit, if I was JNT back in the day, I would worry about this being accessible as to new viewers and also to the new Doctor. But because as I said, looking back on it now, we can enjoy it. But I think at the time, I'd be thinking, is this a good story to introduce the Fifth Doctor? I don't know. I mean, I like it, but I don't know. It's not one for the casual viewer, I don't think. It's not one to bring on new viewers, I don't think. I don't know.
No,
so I know what you mean there, TARDISNet. Yeah.
In terms of onboarding a new viewer to Davison's era, in terms of chronological stuff, then yes. But in terms of getting into that Doctor, should I say, in that era, probably not.
And his favourite Master disguise, better than Khalid from Time Flight.
Oh wow!
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Thank you very much, TN66. Now we've got a newcomer. Let's do it. This is Toby.
Newbie.
Yeah.
Hello, and today I'm reviewing Castrovalva for the Big Blue Box podcast. This is my first audio review, so yeah. Okay, start off, I must say, for a crowded TARDIS team of 3 companions, they each had a lot to do, from Adric being a whole part of the whole element with the Master, to Tegan. I loved Tegan this, probably my favourite companion out of the TARDIS team, and this is providing the usual doctory parts while the Doctor is post-regeneration out of action. It is the first story with the Fifth Doctor, so kind of there has to be the Doctor doing less, which, yeah, the Master was good at it, and I love the idea. The music is great, and I think if I had to say the first part where they're in the TARDIS is probably my favourite part of the story, so I'd say an 8 out of 10. Bye.
Thank you very much, Toby.
8 out of 10. That's a good strong score.
Your first audio review. Thank you very much. And an 8 is a good one to kick off with. Yeah, that opening scene, by the way, is very good. You know, when they're going through various rooms and the Doctor's leaving markers like the threaded scarf and then shoes and all that stuff. That is very cool, actually. Yeah.
I like the way he just randomly comes across his costume on the mirror as well. It's just so random. I quite like that.
Yeah.
It's just like waiting for him, isn't it?
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you very much, Toby. Let's move on then. From Down Under, Sammy Satine.
G'day, Gary and Adam. Sammy Satine here. So, Castrovalva. It's alright. It's watchable. I think it's better than some other post-regeneration stories. I like the references to Jamie, Vicky and other Doctors. I don't have much else to say about it, really. It's fine. I give it 7 zero cabinets out of 10. See ya.
Short and sweet from Sammy.
Short and sweet, 7 0 cabinets.
Yeah, not much to say about it.
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Sammy. Short and sweet, 7 out of 10. Moving on, this is Lewis Palmer.
Hello, Gary and Adam. I'm back again after a long time of not giving any reviews. Anyway, Castrovalva. I think it's a nice bit of fun. It's quite a chilled out story. There are stakes, but it's not, oh my god, the universe is dying, we need to do this, do that. It's just very chilled out, and I find that quite refreshing for a Doctor debut. It doesn't leave you on a feeling of, yeah, new Doctor, let's go. It leaves you on a feeling of, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what this new Doctor does, which I guess is reflective of the Fifth Doctor's kind of personality over his tenure. Anyway, the music stands out for me a lot, especially the track that plays when they're stealing the van at the beginning. A lot of the, again, very serene music when you get to Castrovalva itself. I love that Matthew Waterhouse is very clearly ill at the end. You can see he's about to throw up, and apparently he did throw up after the L cut, which is a fun little bit of trivia. It's not brilliant, but it's a fun 6. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, I think. It's fun and relaxing and nice. So, see you soon, guys.
Welcome back, Lewis.
Yes, a.k.a. the Gargantuan Apple.
Indeedy.
That's your Lewis's YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, if you've listened to this podcast for a long time, then you'll recognise Lewis's dulcet tones in the old review. Yeah, he used to send in reviews quite regularly, from what I remember.
He has a great catchphrase at the start of his videos. I always think, I'd love to have thought of that. I don't know if he did think of it or if he nicked it, but I'm assuming he came up with it. He always starts his videos with, "Hello, mysterious person from behind the screen," or something like that. On the other side of the screen. Oh, I've messed it up. Yeah. Whatever it is he says, I used to think, I like that. I wish I'd thought of that. Hello, mysterious person. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much,
Good to have you back, Lewis.
Yeah. And a generous 7 out of 10 from Lewis. And the last one then. This is Neil Campbell.
Morning, fellas. Hope you're well. So, Castrovalva, Peter Davison's opening story as the Doctor, albeit it wasn't the first story that he recorded. That was for the Doomsday. But anyway, I don't think it's an out-and-out classic, but I don't think by any means it's a bad story. It's dead on. I really like Peter Davison's performance in it, especially with the post-regeneration scenes, where he's acting like previous Doctors, and he's pretty much tearing the Fourth Doctor's costume to shreds, and then talking about Romana and whatnot. I like all that. There's a lot of hands in pockets and dashing about, which is very Fifth Doctor, who is a very underrated Doctor in my opinion. So I think Peter Davison puts in a very good performance here. With regards to the actual plot line itself, it is a bit complicated. I think the Blu-ray effects sort of bring the story up a bit, with the castle and whatnot. I do like the way the TARDIS, lands on its side and they have to climb out of it. I think Adric, I like him with the Fourth Doctor, but straight away, the way he's written in this, it's different. And he's a bit, all over the place a wee bit. The Master, as I said in Logopolis, is very menacing, but in this he sort of turns into more of a pantomime villain. So there were changes that way. But I like the whole index file idea and whatnot, and you can see the difference in location from Logopolis and Castrovalva, even though they're meant to be the same place. But it's not the weakest opening story, it's not the best opening story, but it's dead on, so I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Thank you.
Yes, agree with a lot of that.
7.
Number 7.
Not the weakest, not the strongest.
No.
Okay, it's a fairly good summary of that. Thank you very much, Neil, and thank you to our other audio reviewers as well. You guys went above and aboard this week. It was really cool listening to your voices about how you felt about Castrovalva. Over on the socials, we had just a few. So on Twitter, Chippy T says, I find this a bit of a slog. The TARDIS corridors are replaced by castle corridors. The companions don't have enough to do for the 3 of them, and the Master is yet another cunning plan. Cricket adds bugger all to the Doctor's character. It's hard work. 4 for me this week.
Oh dear, lowest score so far.
Jordan Shortman, one of our writers, says one of my fave stories from Doctor Who.
Really?
The cast are instantly likeable and everyone gets a fair share of the action. The location is stunning and a solid script. Maybe a little complicated, for sure. Series 19 is my favourite and gets off to a great start. Nice one, Jordan.
Yeah.
Edward Giluli says there is some good imagery with the repeating staircases and some nice location work, but overall it's a bit dull, so a 6.5. And Sarah Louise, the running Whovian, says a great introduction to the 5th Doctor. Peter delivers a convincing regeneration and there's plenty going on, including lots of action scenes for the TARDIS crew who work very well together. An 8 out of 10.
An 8. Cool.
Nice one, Sarah. And a couple over on Facebook. Andrew Stewart says, I really enjoy this one. And he does, by the way, I'm doing the Master. Even though it is weird but delightful. The TARDIS team seem a lot more comfortable with Peter. Anthony Ainley is delightful as the Master, even though I could sell him from a mile off in that disguise. The plot is really good, and the cliffhanger to the 1st or 2nd episode is brilliant. 8 out of 10. And if you guys read his review on Facebook, he's put that little cackly laugh in between loads of sentences. And also Charlie Turner says, I just rewatched this one the other day as part of my Nissa marathon. At the time of writing this comment, conveniently. So this story is weird, and I find that the time trap thing to be a bit on the trippy side of things in terms of the effects, but not the best way to introduce the Doctor, but most definitely not the worst either. It's okay as a whole. 5 out of 10.
5.
So, dude, some mixed scores on this one.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, really. I don't think this is a story for everyone. But, yeah, I think we're all a bit bemused by it, aren't we? It is a story that if you like it, you can't really explain why.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting that most people, and I think I include myself in this, like the first 2 episodes better than the last 2, and it's all in the TARDIS. It's really weird. They managed to get some great drama just out of the TARDIS interior, which is, something. But yeah, mixed bag there.
Yeah, it is a mixed one, isn't it? Yeah, but thank you very much to everybody that's got in contact to give us your thoughts and reviews and so on. Next week, buddy, what are we on?
Next week, Torchwood, Series 2. Still. We must be getting to the end of Series 2. I don't know what episode this is.
This is the penultimate one, I think.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Okie dokie. It's called Fragments. Actually, the last couple of Torchwoods have been pretty good, I have to say. So I hope this is a good one. Yeah, Fragments.
Fragments, indeedy. Rightio then. I think on that note, we'll stick a pin in it there for 322.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much for coming back for another week and listening to the Big Blue Box podcast. If you're a new listener, then welcome aboard the TARDIS. It's great to have you here. If you're an old-time listener, one of the grizzled ancients, then it's great to have you here also. Anyone that's listening to us in New York at the minute, I hope you guys are staying safe and stuff. It looks pretty horrendous what's going on over there at the minute. So I've spoken to a few of our listeners in the past anyway from NYC, so if you're over there, then I hope you're keeping safe. As Adam mentioned, we are going to look at Torchwood next week. We're going to continue our what feels like the forever run of series. Are we on series 2? Yeah.
2, yeah.
Series 2, the penultimate episode, Fragments. So get your Blu-rays or your BBC iPlayer fired up and give that a watch. because we'll be asking for your thoughts as always. In the meantime, remember to follow our podcast on your preferred podcast app of choice. That way you won't miss a show when it lands every Friday. And all of our episodes are available on our website as well, which is bigblueboxpodcast.co.uk. You can listen to everything for free over there, as well as check out all of the amazing articles and reviews and stuff from our writing team. Go and check all of that stuff out. Also on the website is links to go off to the socials, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Come and give us a like and a follow over there. And we have a free Discord server as well. So come and sign up to that and chat lots of Doctor Who over there. Remember to also check out Adam's channel over on YouTube. It is, of course, The Geek's Handbag.
Yes, Geek's Handbag. I'm on all the socials as well, Instagram, Twitter, and that old relic Facebook.
Old relic.
Nobody uses anymore.
Oh, God. So go and check out Adam's channel, which is not a relic. It's very up to date and still pumping out lots of content. So go and check out loads of cool videos over there. And Adam is on the socials too, under the same name, The Geek's Handbag. Go and give him a like and a follow. And chat Doctor Who and other sci-fi geeky goodness. Until next week then for 323. My name's Gary.
My name's Adam.
And remember...